Are we going to start subjecting them to special surveillance? Are we going to start discriminating against them because of their faith?
President Obama taking issue today with Donald Trump's anti-Muslim response to the Orlando shooting. State lawmakers have their own response to the shooting. They're making gun safety regulations a priority in Sacramento. And the San Diego City Council passes an emergency measure to curb a drug that has seen a spike in overdoses in recent months. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. The medical examiner in Orlando has started releasing the bodies of the Pulse nightclub shooting victims to their families. A spokeswoman for the medical examiner says at least 20 bodies had been sent to funeral homes. The medical examiner and his team were expected to finish autopsies on all 49 shooting victims today. Autopsies were required for all the victims since their deaths are classified as homicides. Some of the wounded victims of Sunday's shooting spoke today about what happened inside Pulse nightclub after the gunman opened fire. Angel Santiago hid in a bathroom with 15 to 20 other people, many of whom were hiding in the handicap stall.
Everyone was just like, shh, shh, be quiet, be quiet. And that's when bullets start going through the stall wall towards us. So I can't recall exactly how many bullets, but it sounded like he unloaded essentially.
Angel Colon says he was shot several times in the legs and was on the floor playing dead.
When he shoots the girl next to me, and I'm just there laying down, I'm thinking, I'm next, I'm dead. So I don't know how, but by the glory of God, he shoots towards my head, but it hits my hand. And then he shoots me again, and it hits the side of my hip. I had no reaction. I was just prepared to just stay there, laying down, so he won't know that I'm alive.
President Obama blasted Donald Trump today for his call to ban Muslims from immigrating to the U.S. Obama says the presumptive Republican nominee is promoting a plan that would undermine American values.
Where does this stop? The Orlando killer, one of the San Bernardino killers, the Fort Hood killer, they were all U.S. citizens. Are we going to start treating all Muslim Americans differently? Are we going to start subjecting them to special surveillance? Are we going to start discriminating against them because of their faith? We've heard these suggestions during the course of this campaign.
The president plans to visit Orlando on Thursday. House Speaker Paul Ryan was also talking about Trump's proposed ban today. He says it's not in the country's best interest.
I do not think a Muslim ban is in our country.
And we'll have that for you in a moment. Ryan says he favors a security test over a religious test.
I think there's a really important distinction that every American needs to keep in mind. This is a war with radical Islam. It's not a war with Islam. Muslims are our partners. The vast, vast majority of Muslims in this country and around the world are moderate. They're peaceful. They're tolerant. And so they're among our best allies, among our best resources in this fight against radical Islamic terrorism.
Ryan says he favors a security test over a religious test. Following the Orlando mass shooting, California lawmakers pushed to prioritize tightening gun safety regulations. A package of 11 gun control bills are still making their way through the legislative process this week, but Second Amendment activists claim other factors like religion and mental illness are to blame, not guns.
It is an issue of religion, of mental illness, of criminal intent, of a variety of things. But the secret here is that the government is unwilling to look at all of those issues. It's taboo to them to look into those issues, and instead they look for the easy scapegoat.
The activists say strict regulations could leave law-abiding citizens without a way to protect themselves. California residents will have the opportunity to vote on a gun control ballot initiative sponsored by Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom in November. An Indiana man has been charged with felony weapons violations after he was found with assault rifles and explosive chemicals in Los Angeles over the weekend. Police say James Howell told them he was headed to a pride parade in West Hollywood. He's being held on $2 million bail. San Diego police say they've broken up an online members-only website for sex trafficking. 2 San Diego men have been arrested in the case. Police say they ran a site used by 50,000 people to book illegal sex. San Diego Police Captain Brian Ahern says there were 900 members still active when the operation was shut down. That number includes victims and clients.
This is groundbreaking. This is a very covert operation that was very well planned, and it was very sophisticated.
Police say one of the suspects even wrote a novel based on his experiences in the illegal sex trade. San Diego's minimum wage workers will see their pay rise from $10 to $10.50 an hour as soon as last week's votes are certified in July. Almost 63% of San Diegans voted to raise the minimum wage and guarantee 5 sick days for workers. Councilman Todd Gloria led the effort to raise the minimum wage and is now planning on how to enforce it.
The vast majority of employers want to do the right thing, but for those who want to cheat their employees, they have to understand that there will be consequences.
The city could rely on workers reporting underpayment, or it could use a proactive model. Employers who commit wage theft will have to pay back their workers and maybe pay penalties. School districts in San Diego County were criticized a few years back for using expensive bonds to pay for everything from new technology to new schools. Those bonds, called capital appreciation bonds, were the target of legislation to rein in costs. Reporter Leo Castaneda with our news partner iNewsSource gives us an update on the apparent resurgence of the bonds.
A few years ago, the Poway Unified School District came under fire over a $1 billion payout for a $100 million capital appreciation bond. These bonds were criticized throughout the state for having very high payback ratios. For example, the San Isidro School District had a bond that cost $15 for every $1 borrowed. And districts didn't have to pay for 30 or 40 years, and then they faced massive balloon payments. In 2013, the California legislature passed new rules to really limit how districts could use capital appreciation bonds. And for a while after that, districts stopped using those bonds altogether. But now they're back in fashion. Last year, California school districts issued about as many capital appreciation bonds as they did in 2011 or 2012. But schools and county officials say the bonds are different this time around, following all the new regulations, so taxpayers won't be saddled with massive debt years from now. San Diego Unified's Crawford High School is one of the campuses that will be modernized through a new bond. Crawford will get updated athletic facilities, and the payback ratio cost will be $2 for every dollar borrowed. The payments will start in 2032. To see if your district issued one of these bonds recently, go to iNewsSource.org. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda.
In just a few years, San Diego High School's lease at Balboa Park is set to run out. City leaders are now looking at a possible ballot measure to let the school stay where it's been since 1882. It's the oldest high school in the city, and the current lease is set to expire in 2024. The issue would have to go to the voters because the city charter says parkland is supposed to be for park uses. California's cash report shows the tax revenue shortfall continues. Tax revenues took a dip in May and April. The state paid out more money in tax refunds to corporations than corporations paid in taxes. The shortfall came in at $154 million. But State Controller Betty Yee says that doesn't necessarily mean California is headed for another recession.
I think the governor rang the bell in terms of really letting the legislature know he's concerned. Certainly, are we in for a recession? No one's calling a recession. Are there signs that things might be slowing? Sure.
Yee says personal income tax revenues were strong in May, and she expects that to continue this month. Human rights activists from San Diego and other U.S. cities are on a fact-finding mission in Mexico for the next 2 weeks. They're looking into how the U.S. contributes to human rights abuses in Mexico. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
International human rights organizations have increasingly exposed the involvement of Mexican authorities in kidnappings, mass executions, and other crimes. Now they want to show how U.S. military aid and arms sales are playing a role in this crisis. The American Friends Service Committee, which is leading the fact-finding mission, says homicides in Mexico have increased alongside U.S. arms sales. I spoke to Benjamin Prado of the committee. He's on the fact-finding mission, collecting testimonies from people who've had relatives kidnapped and suffered other abuses by authorities that receive money from the U.S.
So that this way our tax monies are not being used to displace people, to disappear people, to commit crimes against humanity, that in fact we have a responsibility to highlight these cases.
These activists are calling for an end to Plan Merida, which offers billions of dollars in training, weapons, and other equipment to the same security forces implicated in human rights violations. They also want to end Plan Frontera Sur, in which the U.S. is outsourcing immigration control to Mexico's southern border, leading to abuses of Central American refugees. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
A San Diego-based humanitarian group hosted a gathering of community health workers today to share information about the Zika virus. It's part of an effort to educate the public and prevent the virus from spreading in our region. Project Concerned International says the virus has not spread to mosquitoes in the county, but they are urging the community to be on guard.
We have summer coming up. We have travelers from Central and South America, and as the epidemic, goes up in those regions, it is expected that it will affect this region as well as other regions in the southern region of the U.S.
The disease is spread primarily by Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which were first discovered in San Diego at the end of 2014. Health officials say the virus can also be transmitted sexually by someone who has been infected. The Zika virus is most dangerous to pregnant women because it is linked to brain abnormalities in newborns. To prevent Zika, people are urged to use mosquito repellent and remove any standing water from their yards. Lawmakers passed a new law aiming to make prescription drugs safer. Proponents of the bill say currently physicians may mistakenly prescribe drugs that could have dangerous interactions with the patient's other prescriptions. The measure requires physicians to check a patient's drug history before writing a prescription.
We have heard of tens of thousands of people from small towns to major cities who've lost their lives to prescription drug overdoses. Each unfortunate incident serves as a reminder of the many lives that could have been saved if we had done our part as a state to protect against drug overdoses.
The measure also calls for physicians to check an electronic database before prescribing certain powerful painkillers, such as Oxycontin, Vicodin, and Percocet. The bill now heads to Assembly Appropriations. The San Diego City Council has approved an emergency law against designer drugs like Spice. The city law takes effect immediately, banning the manufacture, sale, and possession of these drugs. It's intended to fill some gaps in federal and state law. The city says emergency personnel responded to about 650 Spice-related calls between November and March. San Diego is going to take out a loan to replace the aging sails at the downtown convention center. Today, the city council approved borrowing up to $25.5 million for the project. It would not only replace the sails, but also include modernizing the escalators and improving fire safety systems. While the city is taking out the loan, the Convention Center Corporation will be responsible for paying it back. The San Diego Port Commission is reviewing half a dozen proposals for renovating Seaport Village along the downtown waterfront. The various plans call for new retail areas, hotels, and parkland. One of the plans also suggests an observation tower near the waterfront. There are also suggestions for an aquarium. This one is from the Ripley's Company. And there's a proposal for a giant spinnaker as a landmark for the bay. Port commissioners will review the plans next month. Fourth-year architecture students in San Diego are working on a project they hope will create a model for thousands of Nepalese made homeless by last year's earthquake. KPBS North County Bureau reporter Allison St. John says a local nonprofit is working with the students to come up with a building design for a teaching center in the countryside outside Kathmandu.
Welcome back.
The students in Joe Kennedy's class at the New School of Architecture are not designing hypothetical high-tech homes. They're working on a project they hope will actually be built in the not-too-distant future in the mountains of Nepal.
The big earthquake showed that the traditional ways of building are quite dangerous, and so we want to improve upon them.
Kennedy has written books on building in the developing world, and he's passionate about this project.
So is this the map of the site?
This is the map of the region. The town of Panauti, where we're working, is right here, but our site is right in this area right here, actually right in this vicinity right here, so a little bit outside of town.
On a slope?
On a very steep slope, actually. So it's actually a good site because the work is to be for villages that are in the mountains, so having a steep site will allow us to do the best type of project, most replicable in most of Nepal.
The plan is to build a kind of campus where alternative building techniques are demonstrated,
so that the ideas can spread and really become a viral solution. Because we can't go there and build one house at a time. There's something like 750,000 houses that were knocked down. We really want to see those be rebuilt as soon as possible. The only way that's going to happen is by the people themselves.
The project has a direct link to what Nepalis on the ground need. Deep Dioja is a San Diego resident now, but he keeps close ties still with his family in Nepal.
I mean, especially when I went to Nepal this year, then a year after the earthquake, people still don't have any kind of clue on how to rebuild. I went to some of those areas, saw the houses where it's like literally it's just corrugated roofs and nothing. People are living in those situations. People do want to do something better, but then they don't know what it is. I mean, people, like many international organizations, they've been going there and doing the projects, trying to do it themselves, but not, again, the same problem, not teaching the locals to do it.
Dioja has raised money for a non-profit, the Bishwa Seva Foundation, through meditations in North County. They quiet the mind with the help of sound vibrations from Tibetan singing bowls. The foundation has worked with a local school and hopes to break ground this fall on the new building teaching center in Nepal.
If we're going to get a 10-inch rainfall, how are we going to capture as much of that as we can and where are we going to store it?
Kennedy has pulled together experts with experience in sustainable building to contribute to the plans.
And the idea of creating a main center, which will be the site for teaching, as well as 6 different buildings here showing different types of building. So whether it's earth bag, straw bale, gabion band, which is stones within wire mesh, other types of building systems, so that people can come and see different types of systems, say, oh, this fits for my region, I'm going to use this idea.
Architecture student Aisha Al-Shati says she's particularly inspired by the Nepalese cultural and spiritual values that call for a different approach to building, one that she hopes to use in her future work.
And this project is literally called Designing for the 99%, because if you look at the world, it's like 1% that are fortunate enough to have a nice house in a disaster-free country or city. So I'm learning for a bigger perspective.
I'm hoping to inspire students to really look at what's needed out there in the world and find some ways to address those huge problems that we're facing now as a planet.
The students' final presentation on the project will be June 20th. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Matt Bowler helped produce that story. San Diego can expect some sunny and dry weather this week. Molly Cochran says high surf prompted a beach hazard that will remain in place until tomorrow. That's tonight on the KPBS Weather Report.
Well, we continue to deal with dry weather across Southern California. Notice our satellite and radar, though, a little bit more cloud cover getting into Northern California, mainly to the north of San Francisco. Now, we are still contending with some lower clouds, expecting that sunshine to burn things off by later today. And here's a look across our region. We also have a beach hazard statement, and what that means is some high surf and likely to deal with some rip currents over the next 24 to 48 hours. So if you're heading to the local beaches, definitely want to be wary before you're heading into the water. Check in with the lifeguard. Now, for tonight, we'll be under mainly clear skies. The past 6 hours, really not too much to showcase, as it has been rather clear and quiet, especially across the interior sections. Now, we will be watching an increase in cloud cover coming up tonight. Overnight low pretty close to where we should be at for this time of year, in the lower 60s. So 63 in San Diego, 60 in Oceanside, Ramona at 48, and Mount Laguna in the 40s as well. Borrego Springs going to be staying in the 60s tonight, and we will be clear and dry. Now, winds are set to pick up for the interior sections into the middle half of the week, but still along the coast, it'll be seasonable and very bright for the afternoon. If you're waking up early, heading back to work on Wednesday, might have to contend with some lower clouds, but other than that, things are looking pretty nice for our area, even as we head into the upcoming weekend. So the cooler air stays off to the north. Temperatures pretty close to where we should be at for this time of year, in the lower 70s. So 72 on Thursday, some low clouds and some sunshine. Going to be feeling a little bit warmer by the time we head into the weekend. The southwest is going to be sizzling for this upcoming weekend, and as we can see by Sunday at the coast, we're also feeling the heat with a daytime high of 86 with plenty of bright sunshine, and the dry weather really going to be sticking around for the next few days. Here's a look farther inland. 75 by Friday, upper 70s into Saturday, and then Sunday here also going to be climbing into the 80s with partial sunshine. For the mountainous regions, we'll expect temperatures in the upper 60s with sunshine on Thursday, very pleasant on Friday, and then heating up into Saturday and Sunday. And for the desert, it is just going to be very, very warm. Take a good look at Sunday. We're expecting temperatures well into the triple digits with plenty of bright sunshine. So make sure you're staying well hydrated. That goes for the coast as well. And also make sure you're taking lots of breaks if you're going to be spending time outdoors. Molly Cochran, KPBS News.
Some conservative evangelical Christians say they have been pushed to the margins of American life. In part 2 of Divided America, Associated Press reporter Alan Breed talks with evangelicals who believe the culture is seeking to silence the church.
Within the walls of Christian Fellowship Church, joyful noises. But also from Pastor Richie Clendenin, words of prophecy come to pass.
And the Bible says, in this life you will have troubles, you will have persecutions. And let me tell you, that time is here. There's nobody hated more in this nation than Christians. Welcome to America's Most Wanted. You.
Paranoia? Not necessarily.
I think there's no question that evangelicals think that in one way they kind of lost their home field advantage.
Ed Stetzer is Director of Research at Lifeway Christian Resources in Nashville. A recent Lifeway survey found that 2/3 of Americans believe Christians face increasing intolerance.
That's not a fringe belief. That's the majority American belief.
I believe that the voice of Christians is trying to be silenced.
Marshall County is like a lot of rural America. It's a place where faith and politics are closely intertwined. Despite this feeling of losing ground, evangelicals are still an important voting bloc.
We are going to protect Christianity, and if you look what's going on throughout the world.
19-year-old Faith Haley feels some have used religion as a political weapon.
I've seen a lot of hate and a lot of anger, and that is really upsetting, especially when it's done in the name of God.
The same Lifeway survey also found nearly half of Americans feel Christians complain too much about how they're treated. Haley gets that, to some extent.
You hear a lot more about people being offended by Christians rather than for Christians.
Clendenin can foresee a time in the not-too-distant future when churches might lose their tax-exempt status, or when speaking out against homosexuality might be considered a hate crime.
A lot of the issues that we're coming up against brings us to this cliff, and we're right on the edge of it.
Not surprisingly, there's disagreement among evangelicals themselves, particularly when it comes to the issue of LGBT rights and protections.
Oh my God, true evangelicalism starts with how you treat the poor, people who are different, and people who are on the margin.
Christian Fellowship member Daniel Sladen has no problem serving same-sex couples in his restaurant, but he says some seem to think that's not enough.
I'm not going to judge them. That's God's job. You know, the thing that concerns me is when the law tries to get to the point to where it forces me to acknowledge their actions as truth.
Parishioner Adam Dunn says evangelicals have brought a lot of this on themselves.
We've really ruined the love of Jesus in North America, it seems like.
His pastor agrees. The son and grandson of preachers, Clendenin says too many Christians have earned the labels of intolerant and self-righteous.
People are not our enemies. Our enemy is Satan.
Pastor Ritchie tells his flock that the culture is shifting. The question to them is,
what will you do with your light in spite of it? Hide it under a bushel? No.
Clendenin knows what he's going to do.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Alan Breed, Associated Press, Benton, Kentucky.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.